So far in this series, I've talked about the use of the bebop dominant scale, use of arpeggios, improvising over 2-5-1 chord progression in major keys, the bebop major scale, what to do when starting a phrase on a non-chord note on a downbeat, and the use of the flattened ninth on the dominant seventh chords and also diminished scales. So in this video, I want to talk specifically about what scales to use over a half diminished seventh chord in the context of a 2-5-1 in a minor key. A half diminished seventh chord is also known as a minor 7 with a flattened 5. We take a D minor 7 chord and flatten the fifth of the chord, the A, make it A flat. We have a D half diminished seventh chord, which is also known as a D minor 7 with a flat 5 chord. And in a minor key, chord 2 is A minor 7 with a flat 5. So for instance, in the key of C, 2-5-1 would be D minor 7 flat 5, going to G7, noticing that I'm leaving the A flat as the flat ninth of G7 there, going to C minor 6. C minor 6 because it's a tonic minor rather than C minor 7, which is generally found on chord, the second degree of a major scale. Although very often you will find the chord progression D minor 7 flat 5, going to G7, and then going to C minor 7, which becomes 2 of B flat major, followed by F7, going to the tonic B flat major. Now, the default scale, or rather mode, to play over a minor 7 with a flat 5 chord is the Locrian mode. Now, it sounds very technical that, but it's not at all. It's simply the seventh mode of a major scale. In other words, if you take, say, the notes of a C major scale, play exactly the same notes, but starting on the seventh note, which is B, so I'll play it down there. You get a Locrian mode on B there. So it's the notes of a C major scale, but starting on the seventh note, which is B. And although it's the same notes as a C major scale, it sounds completely different because you've completely altered the order of tones and semitones in it. Now, chord 2 in the key of C minor, as I said, is D minor 7 with a flat 5. It is also chord 7 in the key of E flat major. If you construct a series of diatonic seventh chords on an E flat major scale, I'll start down here. You get these diatonic seventh chords, and the seventh one is D minor 7 with a flat 5. And it follows that an E flat major scale, but starting on the note D, in other words, a Locrian mode on D, works over the D minor 7 flat 5. So once again, there's the E flat major scale. Start it on the note D, and you've got the Locrian mode, which works over the D minor 7 flat 5. Now, we're talking about D minor 7 flat 5 in the context of chord 2 in the key of C minor. But remember, E flat major is the relative major of C minor, and the C natural minor scale contains all the same notes. So again, it follows that the Locrian mode on D minor 7 flat 5 still applies in the key of C minor. So if we look at the first 3 examples that I played in the intro, let's look at what I played. I started off with a descending Locrian mode. I didn't start on the D, I started on C, the 7th of D minor 7 flat 5, but then I just came down the notes of an E flat major scale, and then on the G7 I just played just an arpeggio starting on the third, going up to the flat 9. I talked about the things I'm doing on the dominant 7th chord in the last video. There's lots more to say about the options on the dominant 7th chords, but in this video I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm just going to specifically talk about what we play over the minor 7 flat 5 chord. On the second example, I started off in the same place, but when I got to the F, I just then played a little arpeggio based on the D minor 7 flat 5 chord, taking me to the third of G7. In the third example, I started on the third of the chord, F. I went one step up and then came back down the notes of the Locrian mode, which took me to the first note of the root note of G7, G. Okay, now let's look at the last 3 examples that I played in the intro, and you'll notice that in each case I added an extra note to the Locrian mode. It was a chromatic passing note, the note A, in between the B flat and the A flat. So instead of just playing a straightforward Locrian mode, I played this scale. And we call this scale the Bebop half diminished scale. You might notice that it actually contains exactly the same notes as a bebop dominant scale on B flat. That's a B flat 7 chord. That's a B flat dominant 7 scale. B flat 7, of course, is the dominant 7th in the key of E flat, which is the relative major to C minor. So let's look at the actual examples that I played. I started the first one on the third of a D minor 7 flat 5 chord. Just came down the notes of the scale. Note the chromatic passing note there. And I ended up landing on the 7th of G7. On the second example, I started on the B flat. Came down the notes of the bebop half diminished scale. Just did a little turnaround at the end, which once again took me to the F, the 7th of G7. And on the last example, I once again started on B flat. I got to the G, then I went back a step to the A flat, came back down again, and this took me to the 5th of G7. Okie doke, I hope you found that useful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.